Well, the assassination of John F. Kennedy happened almost 62 years ago, but much is still shrouded in secrecy, at least it was. And part of that is because of our own government. Well, thanks to President Trump's executive order calling for the declassification of files relating to the Kennedy assassination, we're finally getting a better sense of the circumstances surrounding President Kennedy's death. And that's not the only mystery that the Trump administration and the House Republicans plan to shed light on. Here to discuss this and more is Congressman James Comer, chairman of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, which is also working to shed light on the details of the assassination and other federal secrets. He represents the 1st Congressional District of Kentucky. Chairman Comer, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about this. Last week, the National Archives released a flood of, I think, about 80,000 pages related to the assassination of JFK. Any surprises in there as you saw and oversaw the release of these documents? And why is this important coming out 62 years later?
Well, there were a few minor surprises, but I don't think there was anything earth-shattering. You know, at the end of the day, there are a lot of people like myself that wonders if the government knew more, if there were documents that would that would shed a new light on different angles or different participants in the assassination attempt, would our government have kept them in a safe somewhere in a filing cabinet for the past 60 years? My gut says no. Someone would have shredded those documents a long time ago or disregarded those tapes. But at the end of the day, what I think the most important thing with what President Trump's doing is we've got to restore confidence in the government. I think most conservatives agree our government's too big. We need to significantly reduce the size of our government. But at the end of the day, I do think we need a government. And with the government we have now, most conservatives don't have a lot of confidence in the government. And when you don't have confidence in the government, you don't believe anything that the government says, then it becomes a problem. And that's when you do have the potential for a coup or for a real insurrection or a real threat to democracy like the Democrats talk about. So what President Trump's doing is being transparent. He's opening, he's opening the windows where sunlight can come in and we can see exactly what role our government played in a lot of our American secrets. And I think that's the first step in restoring confidence in our government. I applaud President Trump for doing that.
I would agree with you, Mr. Chairman, because it's like when you look at, for instance, we get this rating of voter or of consumer confidence rating. Mm-hmm. And our economy basically works because we believe it works. It would fall very quickly if the consumers didn't have confidence in it. The same is true of our government. Our government works because we have confidence in it. But if we lose that confidence, which I think we're losing, and I think this is a remedy. And then, of course, last month, your committee created the task force on declassification of these federal secrets. So kind of expound on that. What are the goals of the task force? What else might we find more information about when it comes to government secrets?
Well, the thing you have to understand about our government, I think President Trump's doing a great job exposing this, is a lot of these agencies are run by unelected bureaucrats who you'll never see their face, you never know their name, but they have, unprecedented amounts of power in those agencies. And they haven't been complying with the orders, especially when you have a Republican administration. Let's take two things that President Trump's done with respect to transparency and releasing information that had been previously classified to the American people. He ordered the declassification and the release of the JFK files a few months ago, and he did the same on the Epstein files. In both instances, bureaucrats handed over a fraction of what they really possessed. That's when we created the task force, not to go after President Trump, but to go after these bureaucrats and these bureaucracies that aren't complying with the orders of the President of the United States. When the President ordered the release of the JFK files, the bureaucracy did not comply. They only released a fraction. And the same with the Epstein files. And we're still awaiting the release of that. So the task force is going to put pressure on these bureaucracies, on these bureaucrats, and bring them in and question them. And I say, why didn't you comply with the order of the President of the United States? This is the will of the American people. Explain to us why you didn't release the files when the president first said it. So, in both instances, the JFK files and the Epstein files, there had to be a redo because these bureaucracies are just out of control. They've gone for at least 4 years without coming to work under the Biden administration, and they've had no oversight. So now we've got a strong commander in chief who's been transparent with the American people and said, we're going to release these files. Our task force is going to make sure every single file gets released.
It's a source of power for the deep state to hold on to these.
Yep.
Now, I don't know your experience, but my experience when I got classified briefings, when I had my security classification clearance, is that really it wasn't much that they really they held back information. Never really got much from those classified briefings. It's a source of power for them to be able to control this and say, well, this is classified. We have this information. We can't tell you what it is.
That's exactly right. I've quit going to classified briefings unless I absolutely have to, because it's insulting. These deep state bureaucrats, they patronize you. They don't tell you anything that's not already on Google. If you type in a word, whatever the briefing's about, it'll be the first story that pops up from the AP or one of the mainstream media outlets. So we've got to revamp the entire intelligence community. We've got to revamp the Justice Department. And we've got to revamp all these bureaucracies, whether it's the EPA, whether it's the Department of Labor. Hope we get rid of the U.S. Department of Education. The bureaucrats have been in control for at least the past 4 years, and our country's not better off. We don't have a better energy policy in the United States because of the bureaucrats in the Department of Energy. Our education system has not improved because of the bureaucrats at the Department of Education, and we sure aren't in better shape on the international scale because of anything our intelligence community has done. I would argue we're in worse shape because of the decisions of our intelligence community. So thankfully, we've got a president that's trying to drain the swamp, but it's going to be hard, Tony. And I hope our oversight committee, whether it's that task force going after these bureaucrats that won't release the classified documents that President Trump orders, or whether we're bringing in bureaucrats who refuse to work with this administration on policy, we're going to play a role in trying to help President Trump enact his agenda and drain the swamp.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, because you've actually introduced legislation that will help expedite this process. I mean, I would argue that the bureaucrats have been in control going back to the Great Society over 60 years ago, and they don't want to give up that power. You've introduced the Reorganizing Government Act of 2025 that will kind of streamline the president's agenda of reorganizing government. Won't grow it, but we'll reorganize it so it works more efficiently. Tell our viewers and listeners about that.
Well, President Trump campaigned on reorganizing the federal government. We want to get rid of some agencies that have become obsolete. We want to return power. We want to return power and decision making back to the states and local governments, especially with respect to education. And what my bill does, we'll codify into law what President Trump is wanting to do with his executive orders in reorganizing the government. It's very important that this gets passed into law so that some judge doesn't try to kick it out, or the next administration, whoever that might be, doesn't try to end the executive orders. We want this to be the law of the land. We believe that we have the votes in Congress to do that. We know that any member of Congress that would oppose this reorganization is opposing the mandate that President Trump received. And look, I don't think anyone with any common sense would think that we can continue to spend $2 trillion a year more than we take in. We have to reduce unnecessary and wasteful spending. We can do that by reducing the unneeded bureaucracies in America. And I think that that's what this bill will do. And hopefully, this bill has the blessing of President Trump and his entire cabinet. It's something that needs to happen, and we're going to vote it out of committee this week.
So it'll come out of committee this week, and when might we see something like this on the House floor?
I hope in the next 2 or 3 weeks it'll be on the House floor, but definitely we'll pass it out of the House Oversight Committee, and you'll see there won't be a single Democrat vote for it. Because the Democrats think that you solve every problem in America by creating another government agency. If our kids are failing in school, then we need to create another government agency and hire a bunch of bureaucrats to try to teach the poor old classroom teacher how to teach better. I mean, it should be insulting to the classroom teachers that we have a U.S. Department of Education. It should be insulting to a lot of federal employees that work on the front lines in these states, that we have fat cat bureaucrats in Washington that make, in many instances, 2 or 3 times what the people who are actually working make. So I know a lot of federal employees have called concerned about cuts and reorganizations of the federal government. If I were a federal employee who actually went to work every day and worked hard on the front lines, I would be applauding these changes because they're going to have more ability to make decisions. And I think we're going to restore some common sense into some of the federal government decision-making that happens on the front lines in America every day.
Yeah, I mean, I think Americans are shocked at what's being revealed by President Trump as he's coming in, and Elon Musk as they're exposing the waste, the fraud, and the abuse. And I hear a lot of applauding, cheering them on and what they're doing. We just have about 3 minutes left, Chairman Comer. I want to ask you about something that's going to be front and center this week as Congress has returned, the House has returned, the Senate's returned, is reconciliation, talking about advancing the president's agenda. You know, we got the temporary funding accomplished for the next 6 months. Now the attention turns to reconciliation. Give us the lay of the land as it pertains to that measure.
Well, there are 7 committees, mine being one of them, the House Oversight Committee, that are going to come up with significant savings over a 10-year period. My House Oversight Committee has come up with $50 billion in savings. The Energy and Commerce Committee is going to come up with $880 billion in savings. This will lay the groundwork to be able to renew the Trump tax cuts and to create more tax cuts, because what the Republicans want to do is we want to give hardworking Americans more of their paycheck back. We don't want Washington to take more. We want them to have more to where Washington doesn't have the waste, fraud, and abuse. We're not cutting programs that our seniors need. We're not cutting programs in education that affects the student in the classroom. We're cutting bureaucracies. We're ending improper payments. That's what the Trump agenda is all about. Restoring sanity into our federal government, reducing the size of the federal government, but while still providing the services that everyday hardworking Americans expect and deserve to get. They expect and deserve to have a secure border. They expect and deserve to get Social Security check. They expect and deserve to get a Medicare check when they get old enough to get on Medicare. But they don't deserve a big bureaucracy with hundreds of thousands of federal employees who haven't been to work in 4 or 5 years making a big paycheck. We've got to restore fiscal discipline. That's what this budget reconciliation bill is. It's the president's agenda in one bill. The good thing about it, we don't need a Democrat vote to pass it. We haven't found a Democrat yet, other than maybe Fetterman, who's even expressed any willingness to work with President Trump. So we can pass this bill with just Republicans in the House and just Republicans in the Senate, and hopefully we'll do that. Hopefully we'll do that in the next 45 days.
Final question for you, Chairman Comer. So in the midst of all of that, reducing the bureaucracy, cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, renewing the tax cuts so that Americans do not see a tax increase, you're also going to be reducing the deficit.
Yeah, I mean, look, we can't, again, continue to spend $2 trillion a year more than we take in. And that's during a pretty good economy. If we have a recession or something, that deficit would automatically rise because businesses wouldn't be making profits and paying taxes. So we've got to get our house in order. And when you look at what the USAID has uncovered with wasteful spending, what some of these NIH grants were going for in wasteful spending, all these DEI offices in every agency, look, it's already illegal to discriminate. Right. We don't need another layer of bureaucracy to preach to the choir. We've got to reduce the size of government. That's what we want to do in this budget reconciliation bill. And we want to give Americans more of their hard-earned money back to be able to continue to spur economic growth.
And we're all for that. Chairman James Comer, always great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.